CBT works. The research on this is actually quite robust. Decades of randomized trials, strong effect sizes, consistent replication across populations and settings. This video is not going to tell you CBT is broken. It's going to tell you something more specific than that. CBT was built for a particular kind of anxiety. And if yours isn't that kind, or isn't only that kind, then it working partially or temporarily or not at all is exactly what the research would predict. That's not a refrain designed to make you feel better. That's a mechanistic fact about what the tool was designed to reach and what it wasn't. By the end of this, you'll understand the difference at the level that actually explains your experience. Not, therapy didn't work for me. Not, I'm someone who can't be helped. The more precise version. The one that changes what you do next. To understand where CBT falls short, you have to first understand where it genuinely succeeds. And it does genuinely succeed for a specific category of the problem. Here's the core of what CBT actually does. It works at the level of thought. The model is straightforward. A situation triggers an automatic thought. That thought generates an emotional response, and the emotional response drives behavior. CBT intervenes in the middle of that chain. It trains you to identify the automatic thought, examine the evidence for and against it, and replace it with something more accurate. That process, done consistently, genuinely works on the cognitive component of anxiety. If your anxiety is primarily driven by specific, identifiable distortions, catastrophizing, mind reading, all or nothing thinking, cognitive restructuring can interrupt those patterns with real and lasting effect. The behavioral component works too. Exposure and behavioral activation, doing the thing the anxiety tells you to avoid, builds real evidence that the feared outcome doesn't materialize. That evidence accumulates. Avoidance shrinks. So if you did CBT and experienced some relief, that was real. The tool was doing what it was built to do. Anyone who's been in this and experienced that partial shift knows. There's a specific version of hope that arrives when a thought you've had 1,000 times finally loosens its grip. CBT produces that, reliably, for a lot of people. The question isn't whether it worked. The question is why. For a significant number of people who did the work, who understood the framework, who applied it with genuine effort, the anxiety came back. And that question has an answer that almost never gets explained before someone starts CBT. The cognitive model, situation, thought, emotion, behavior, is accurate as far as it goes. But it starts one step too late in the sequence. Before the thought arrives, something else has already happened. Your nervous system has evaluated the situation, not consciously, not verbally, not through any process you can observe in real time, and assigned it a threat level. That evaluation happens in structures of the brain that operate below the cognitive floor, below the part that produces language and narrative and argument. So here's the question that most anxiety content never quite answers. If cognitive restructuring works, if the thought genuinely becomes more accurate, more proportionate, less catastrophic, why does the body still feel like something is wrong? Because the body and the thought are being driven by two different systems. The thought is generated by the cognitive layer. The part CBT is directly targeting the physiological response, the heart rate, the chest tightness, the low-grade sense of threat that hums underneath a perfectly normal day. That's being generated by a system that doesn't take input from the cognitive layer in the same direction. You can argue your way to a more accurate thought. You cannot argue your way to a lower baseline threat signal. Research in this area, particularly work on how the threat detection system processes and stores threat information, consistently points to the same basic finding. The nervous system encodes threat through experience, not through explanation. It learns what's dangerous by what happened, not by what you told it happened. Which means, changing the story you tell about the threat is different from changing the threat level itself. CBT does the first thing. It does it well. The second thing requires something different. And for a nervous system that has been running at a chronically elevated baseline, the kind that doesn't fully deactivate between threats, the kind that generates anxiety in the absence of any identifiable trigger, that second thing isn't optional. It's the floor that was missing. Let's talk about what actually happened when CBT helped and then stopped holding. It's not complicated once you see it. Cognitive restructuring succeeded at the level it was targeting. The catastrophic thought became quieter. The spiral interrupted more quickly. The immediate spike was more manageable. That was real progress. That was the tool doing its job. But underneath that cognitive layer, the nervous system's baseline threat setting didn't change. Not because you didn't work hard enough. Not because you weren't consistent enough. Not because you have some resistance to change that other people don't. because that's not what cognitive restructuring reaches. Think of it this way. CBT built you a better first floor. The thoughts became more accurate. The automatic distortions became more visible. The connection between thought and feeling became more navigable. That's the first floor. The second floor, the nervous system's baseline, the physiological threat level that runs below the cognitive layer, was never part of the renovation. So when life loaded up again, when sleep got shorter or stress accumulated, or something happened that the nervous system recognized as pattern matching to something old, the thoughts returned, not because the cognitive work was undone, because the signal that generates the thoughts had never actually quieted. That's not a failure. That is the predictable behavior of a system that was partially addressed. You didn't fail CBT. You completed the first floor of a 2-story building and were never told that there was a second floor. Anyone who's been in the specific exhaustion of that, who did the work, who felt it working, who watched it stop holding, knows that this is not a small thing to finally have named. The return wasn't evidence that you're unfixable. It was evidence that the tool had reached its ceiling and the work wasn't done. Those are very different things. If this is opening something you've been carrying for a while, the specific frustration of trying the right things and not getting the right results, there's a course in the description built exactly for this moment. It's called Why Nothing Has Worked, and it goes through the mechanism behind each of the most common anxiety tools, not to dismiss them, but to show you precisely what each one reaches and what it doesn't. Module 2 covers exactly what this video opened. Link is in the description and the pinned comment. Now let's talk about what the second floor actually requires. This is where most videos on this topic either get vague or get evangelical about a particular modality. Neither is useful for someone who's already been through the mill. So here's the honest version. The nervous system doesn't update through argument. It updates through experience, specifically through accumulated experience of safety in situations it currently reads as threatening. That's it. That's the mechanism. The body needs to have the experience of being in a situation that its current threat map says is dangerous, and not have the feared outcome materialize enough times, slowly enough, with enough physiological resolution, that the threat map starts to update. This is different from exposure in the behavioral sense, though it overlaps with it. It's more fundamental than technique. It's about giving the nervous system what it actually learns from. Repeated, embodied experience of coming out of activation and arriving somewhere that registers as safe. The reason most body-based tools feel strange at first, and the reason some people dismiss them, is that they operate through a logic the cognitive mind doesn't recognize. You can't think your way into a regulated nervous system. You have to experience your way there, which means the work is slower than you want it to be, less linear, less measurable in the way that completing a thought record is measurable. But here's what research on nervous system regulation consistently shows. Across different frameworks and modalities, the changes compound. Unlike cognitive work, where the gains are real but require ongoing maintenance, nervous system work, done consistently over time, tends to shift the baseline itself. Not the story about the threat, the volume of the threat signal. That's not a promise about a timeline. It's not a guarantee about a specific method. It's the actual mechanism. The reason this work is different from everything you've already tried. The tool isn't wrong, it's just not reaching the right level. CBT was reaching the right address. The nervous system lives one floor down. If this opens something you want to go further with, the course in the description takes this all the way through, mechanism by mechanism, tool by tool. The link is in the description and in the pinned comment. What was the moment you realized CBT was helping, but not quite reaching the thing you actually needed it to reach? So here's what this actually was. CBT is a real tool. It does real work at a real level. And for a significant number of people, that level is exactly where the problem lives. And it's sufficient. For a different group of people, and you probably know which group you're in, the anxiety lives on 2 floors. The cognitive layer, where thoughts generate distress, and the physiological baseline, where the nervous system runs a threat signal that the cognitive layer inherited but didn't create. CBT addresses the first. It was built for the first. The failure to address the second is not a limitation of the people who tried it. It's a limitation of the map. And what do you do when the map is incomplete? You don't conclude that the territory is unnavigable. You get a better map. The work that reaches the second floor is different work, slower, less legible in the moment, less satisfying to the part of you that wants to track progress in a way that makes sense to your analytical mind. But it's reachable, not through a different version of the same effort you've already been making, through a different kind of effort entirely, one that speaks the language the nervous system actually learns from. The gap between what you tried and what you needed was never evidence that you're broken. It was always evidence that the map had a missing floor. Now you know the floor exists. That's not nothing. That's actually where the work begins.